So good morning everyone. Thank you very much for joining this session today from Automated Intelligence around information governance. Can SharePoint cut it? My name's Maunder and I'm one of the SharePoint specialists over here at AI, and I'll be taking you through today's webinar around information governance and SharePoint. Now, it's an interesting topic because there are some common misconceptions and common, if you like, some common FUD around how SharePoint can be used for governance, information storage, records management, and so forth. And really the aim of the webinar today is to dispel some of those myths and show you how, in conjunction with AI, we can really utilize SharePoint as a full-blown enterprise content management solution, records management solution, and ensure that you meet your governance and legal obligations alongside that. So the agenda for today's webinar. First of all, I'm just going to talk a little bit about why SharePoint. Okay, because there are plenty of content management platforms, record management platforms out there today. So why is it that we're really focusing on SharePoint, and why, as a company within Automated Intelligence, are we really focusing on this platform from Microsoft? Of course, we'll highlight some of the information governance challenges in SharePoint, and I will explain, that whilst SharePoint is a fantastic platform, there are certain limitations that we need to overcome. And through Automated Intelligence Solutions, I'll show you how we can overcome some of those challenges to meet some of the requirements you may need to meet in your own organizations. I'll take you through a demonstration of how some of that might work. It'll be actually a scenario-based demonstration on how some of these capabilities can actually facilitate certain tasks. And then we'll summarize, and at the very end we'll do some Q&A. So before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. This will be a 30-minute session today. So we're not going to take you through hours and hours of slides and explanation. We want to give you a flavor of what the art of the possible is here. And of course we'll be presenting some contact details and ways we can follow up for a more in-depth discussion around your own individual needs. Audio today is provided through GoToWebinar. Hopefully you can hear me. If you can't, you won't be able to hear this message, but hopefully seeing this will enable you to switch that on. If you do have any issues or you do have any questions, there is a Q&A pane available through GoToWebinar, so I'd encourage you to ask those questions. But we will look to get to those questions at the very end of the session, although if you are having any technical issues with GoToWebinar, then please do use the Q&A pane, and one of my colleagues will be able to assist you further. At the very end of the session, we'll also be doing a poll, just to ensure that this session was useful for you. So I'd ask you please to stay and stick around to the very end, just to ensure you can feedback your thoughts on the session today. So just very briefly, there are some people who have worked with us before on the webinar today, some of you who may have not have come across our organization. So Automated Intelligence are a UK-based Microsoft Gold partner, and what we're really about is helping organizations develop their own information governance architectures. And we specialize in solutions for information lifecycle management and governance, and some of that you'll see very much today. We're very close to Microsoft, of course, SharePoint being one of our primary, one of the primary solutions we work with, and we have a number of customers across a range of different sectors, from private sector, local government, regional government, and so forth, who are utilizing our solutions today to great effect. And you can see some of the organizations here will, of course, have a lot of stringent standards and legal matters that they have to comply with. And they've chosen our solutions to be able to do that. Okay, so a very brief introduction into AI, but where I want to focus on now is, first of all, why SharePoint? Why is it that we're focusing on SharePoint as a solution to build upon for a true enterprise governance, information governance platform? Well, the great thing about SharePoint, first of all, and when we speak to our customers, what a lot of organizations are looking to do is consolidate and standardize. And SharePoint provides a fantastic platform to enable you to do this. A lot of the work we do is around taking disparate legacy platforms that exist in the business today and bring that all together to reduce cost and to make content easier to find, as well as easier to govern as well. It's much easier to apply policies and governance to one platform than to many. So hopefully that's something you're looking to do at the moment, because, as I say, if we can perform these exercises, this can lead to drastically reduced costs, whether it's cost of storage or cost of maintaining those legacy platforms that may exist today. But really what we want to do, we need to start thinking about the user. We need to encourage governance rather than force it down people's throats, for want of a better term. We want people to find it easy to comply with these standards, or maybe not even have to think about them. You know, they go about their day-to-day job, but we know in the background that our content is being managed in the right way to meet our own obligations. So we're looking to really encourage that process, and at the same time improve discovery. So thinking about some of the points I've already made, we need to consider how easy it is to find information, whether that's from a user perspective, to find the document they need to work with that particular day, or to find some specific information, or again, to meet certain governance or legal obligations like Freedom Information Act requests, or legal cases that we need to gather content on. So we need to make it easy to improve how information is found. Consolidating that in one place and using some of SharePoint's advanced discovery solutions can really aid us to do that. The other thing to consider is about how we can encourage users and how do we integrate with some of the ways they're already used to working. And we do that with Office integration. SharePoint from the ground up is designed to work with other Office applications that users are already familiar with, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Outlook. So having a platform that can do that out of the box and natively is always going to be of a benefit to the user and to the business. And the fact of the matter is, most organizations, or a lot of organizations today, already have some kind of SharePoint license, or maybe even a SharePoint platform or infrastructure already in place, but it's not really being used. You know, so what we find a lot of the time when we are speaking to clients is that we can actually start leveraging a platform that already exists with licenses that are already procured, so the path to moving to SharePoint, if haven't been done so already, can be a much simpler and less costly process. We can then also thinking about enhancing security as well, consolidating information in one place, and leveraging again SharePoint's advanced permissions model and metadata attributes means that we can potentially enhance security over and above how it's already being done in today's infrastructure. Take the old-fashioned file share, for example. Traditionally quite hard to secure, maintain granular permissions and so forth, but with a platform like SharePoint we can absolutely do that. And ultimately, as I've already mentioned, it's about improving the user experience. It's about taking what is familiar to users today, enhancing that, and enabling them to do their best work, but in the easiest way possible. Because if we do that, then we're always going to have a more controlled environment to work with. Now, one of the things about SharePoint is that when SharePoint 2007 came about, so this is a brief history of SharePoint, there was some very limited overlap with legacy compliance solutions that exist today in SharePoint. But unfortunately, there wasn't a huge amount that SharePoint could do over and above some of these legacy applications. But when SharePoint 2010 and 2013 was launched, then really that overlap became much more minimal. Around 80% of the capabilities required from a legacy, say, document management or records management platform could be achieved by SharePoint. But there was still that gap. There are still those issues that remain, which will stop many businesses or many people actually moving to SharePoint for a consolidated information and records management platform. And so what are some of those challenges? Well, the big one, the one we hear all the time, is SharePoint isn't an enterprise records management platform. And because of that, we cannot meet some of the standards and legal obligations we need to meet as an organization. So take MoReq 2010 or some of the ISO standards, TNA and so forth. You know, some of these have a lot of stringent requirements, both functionally and non-functionally, to enable us to comply with those particular standards. And while SharePoint has some of the capabilities, it doesn't necessarily tick all of the boxes. That in itself may be a blocker for a lot of people. So that's something we need to consider. And what a lot of our customers tell us is around 80%, maybe sometimes 70–80% of the content that exists in their infrastructure actually exists in email, believe it or not. So while SharePoint does have a limited amount of email integration, it's not necessarily intuitive and can be quite one way. So how do we overcome some of those objections? And how do we, as I mentioned before, not only find information and discover content, but actually take it out of SharePoint as well? Again, sometimes seen as a limitation that it's easy to get information into SharePoint, but can be quite challenging to get it out. That's fine in some cases, but when we have things like freedom of information requests or legal cases and so forth, we need to comply with that capability to take information out in a compliant way, really important. And then when we think about the life cycle of content, things like disposals, declaring of records and so forth, again, SharePoint has some of those capabilities, but it doesn't extend to a more advanced records management platform when it comes to things like disposition and actually managing some of those processes. It can be quite manual in some cases in SharePoint and can be quite limiting, and I'll highlight some of those when we get to the demonstration. One of the core things, one of the core pieces around SharePoint is metadata management. How do we ensure we manage how information is tagged and classified? Really, really key to enable search to work, workflows, permissions are accurate, many, many other things. And again, to meet some of the legal obligations we need to face, we need to ensure metadata is properly managed. And again, encouraging the user to add reams and reams of metadata can be a challenge. How do we overcome that? And even simple things like managing content within the environment, moving files around, believe it or not, is actually quite challenging in SharePoint. It doesn't contain simple content reorganization capabilities out of the box. So again, these are things we're looking to meet and address. And then finally, how do we ensure we encompass the user? I've mentioned it several times already, but it's so key. It's so important that we make sure that the user is considered so that they actually utilize the platform in the first place. So what we do at Automated Intelligence and how we help is we take those missing components, some of those challenges that I've already highlighted, and by the way, that's not an exhaustive list, and we add in AI Compliance Extender. Compliance Extender is a SharePoint solution which is designed to integrate into SharePoint. It's designed to be deployed as a number of features so that we can overcome some of the challenges that we have already discussed. But please don't take my word for it. What I want to do now is take you into a demonstration so I can explain a little bit around how this may work for you. So, just to explain a little bit about the scenario. So I've got a user, that's me, who is currently working on a project, and they wish to, what we're going to do is take you through the life cycle of how that project will work and how we ensure information governance on that particular project. So what's actually going to happen in this scenario is that we have a SharePoint environment, a SharePoint site, as you can see, with some libraries. And what's happened right now is I've just received an email from an external party who has provided me with a project brief that needs to be worked on within my organization. So you can see I've got a project brief attachment over here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to, because that's come from an external source, I'm going to put that into my SharePoint environment straight away so I have that single version of the truth. And I can do that very simply by dragging and dropping into the relevant location in my SharePoint environment using a product called AI Sync Point, which is our email and SharePoint integration solution. This was subject to a separate webinar. The recording is available on the website, so I'm not going to be taking you through that in too much detail, but that is available available to view in more detail. What I've done, I've simply dragged that document into my environment, and I'm now going to go into my workspace, and you'll see that that file a few seconds ago has just been uploaded into my environment, and I'm just going to take you straight into that library to look at that. So the document is now available to me, available to you to edit, access, and for other people to access as well. And in fact, what I want to do, you'll see on my home page that I have a number of other users who can help me with this particular project, and I can see John over here as an expert. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm just going to send John a quick link message through the SharePoint window and say, "Hi John, the project document is now available." Okay, so really, really simple thing to do, just to bring in SharePoint and Outlook integration as well as link integration to bring in some of that information. So John's going to reply back and he's going to let me know that the information is now available, and I can actually provide access to him as well should I need to do so. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go into back into Outlook because I just want to send John a link to that document. So here's my document here, and I'm just going to quickly send him a link. This is another sync point function to enable the quick and easy sending of useful links to the relevant person without having to send the entire document itself. So as requested, I'm just going to send John that particular document so he can now collaborate on it as well. So now that John's got access, we can both start working on the document, editing it, and so forth. And of course, I can go in to that particular document, make changes, make edits, and do whatever it is I need to actually do with this particular item ready for the project. So I'm going to make some changes. I'll obviously say that this is going to be ready for April, once I've clicked Edit Document, of course. And I'm just going to change the reviewed by Matt Maunder, and John is going to be my authorizer. I'm just going to save that back to SharePoint. So standard SharePoint document collaboration, of course, we can use multi-party collaboration and all those kinds of good things. Now, one of the things that's interesting with this, if I go into the document library itself, you'll see that when I uploaded the document, metadata has been automatically applied just by performing that drag and drop. I haven't needed to add the metadata manually. It's been applied automatically through that simple drag and drop mechanism and editing and saving and so on and so forth. And that's actually a compliance extender feature from AI. So let me just demonstrate that in a little bit more detail. If I, for example, add in another document into here, just by this more traditional method of adding a document, you'll see that when I'm presented with the metadata pane to add in metadata, that has been automatically added. I, as a user, have not had to add in that metadata myself. This is really powerful because we can ensure that information and content is effectively tagged with the right information without having the user to manually enter in many, many fields of metadata. This is really, really important to ensure that that takes place, and that is done through the compliance extender metadata inheritance capability. So you can see a number of fields there automatically populated, and I can go ahead and save that back, and again that metadata has been automatically applied. Reduces the onus on the user, but ensure information is effectively and properly categorized and tagged. Now, I've got my documents, I've been working on the documents within my project, but I have realized that there are a few other documents that I need to make available within this library relevant to this project. And if I go back out of my library, and I go to my project documents library over here, there are some documents in here I also want to make available. So there's a few documents here I actually need in that other library as I've just shown you. So how do I move that content? In SharePoint out of the box, it's quite challenging. With automated intelligence and compliance extender, you'll see I have some additional functionality up here in the ribbon. And in particular, I have a clipboard capability. This enables me to cut, copy, and paste content around the SharePoint environment. So from a user perspective, I don't have to perform a download then re-upload or anything like that. I can simply take the items and cut them, and I can go to my location I want to move that content to, go back up to my clipboard, and paste them in. Very, very simple, really intuitive, and it shows the user, it's familiar to the user because everyone really understands cut and paste. You'll see that I can add a reason why I've moved this item, and I can also specify whether permissions, metadata, or other characteristics are actually inherited or preserved on that content based upon where it's actually come from. So I can do that, and I can also add in a reason as well. I can ensure that that's actually audited properly by providing that reason why I've decided to move those files. So again, it ensures that full transparency and ensures that that content is moved in the absolute right way to manage content effectively. So my files are now in the environment, in the library, and I've done that through the AI clipboard capability. Now, one of the other things that I've noticed in my library is you'll see that with my metadata, I have some quite key metadata which is actually important from a security perspective, and these are the protective markings. Now the protective markings is enabled through another compliance extender feature from Automated Intelligence. This provides an additional layer of metadata-based security on my content. And how this works is that depending on the actual protective marking will depend on what I can access as a user. So for example, with code words, I have, in this case, budget. So as a user, I need to have that code word associated with me to be able to access that document. You'll see that there are also national caveats. And with the national caveats, I need one of these, I need to be associated with one of these nations, again, to be able to access one of these items. And then finally, I have my security marking, which enables me to, well, effectively states that I need an equivalent or higher level of security, in this case protect, again, to be able to access document. So the protective markings feature provides that additional layer of security. But what I've noticed in this particular environment is that my security markings are not actually correct. It doesn't actually comply with the project I'm working on. So traditionally, how would I make sure I can ensure that every single document has the right metadata or protective marking associated with it? In SharePoint, you would edit each item one by one. And if you've got hundreds or thousands of documents, of course, that's not really practical. So what I can do, if I come back out to my library, I can actually edit the metadata from a parent perspective. So I can take those metadata attributes and actually make changes in bulk. So here are my protective markings as I've just explained. And so for example, I can add in an additional code word, say contracts. So as a user, I now need both of these terms associated with me to be able to access that content. My national caveats are actually okay. We can keep that as it is. But security marking I need to change as well. And I'm going to change that to restricted. So you'll see the hierarchical nature of the security marking in that I need a restricted or higher level of security to be able to access this particular document. So I've made the changes to the protective markings, a compliance extender capability, and then you'll see we have an additional function, cascade changes. Now that will then make and apply those metadata changes to all of the documents within my library. Really, really important feature because it enables that global management of content and it enables me to effectively manage change. So you can see 7 items have now been updated, and then if I go in, you'll see those changes have been propagated to my content. Now these are things that full-blown bespoke records management platforms can't necessarily do. So having these kind of capabilities really does enforce security, enforce governance, but ensure it's easy and the user is not impacted by these changes should they come up. So we've looked a little bit already around how we can get content into SharePoint, how can we ensure metadata is automatically applied, how we can ensure content can be reorganized, and how can we ensure the security through additional layers of security like protective markings, which are in addition to the standard SharePoint permissions model that exists. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to advance a little bit of time. The project is kind of coming to a close now, and what I actually need to do is I need to ensure that anything relating or some of the files relating to the project are actually filed away and recorded or declared as records for full auditability. So traditionally what I do in SharePoint is I could either send this document to the record center one by one, which again from a scalability perspective is not fantastic, or I can declare in place in the library itself, which again causes some issues in terms of good records governance best practices. So what I can do is I can select the files which are relevant to be declared as records, and I can actually hit this declare record button at the top here. Now what that's going to do is it's going to declare the records or declare the documents as records and automatically send them to the record center in my SharePoint environment. And those of you who aren't familiar with some of these concepts, in SharePoint we can have a separate location where content or records are stored, and a record being a file which is never going to be changed or edited. It's going to stay there as a file which will never be edited or changed. So what's happened when I've clicked that button is in bulk I've declared those documents as records and sent them to the record center, and you'll see that the documents have a little shortcut now icon associated with it, and I can actually go in to that shortcut and I can see where the document has been sent to. I have a link for just for ease to ensure I can actually find the document should I need to do so. But the actual content itself, the actual document, has actually been moved over to my record center. So having my records centralized in one location, that's beneficial for a number of reasons. First reason is that it means I can manage governance, dispositions, and other elements of change and best practice through one area or one location. One of the other reasons, though, and if I just drill down, you'll see in this library, in this folder here, that because of where I've come from and where how the files have been categorized in my library, it's been automatically sent to the right location as a user. I have not needed to specify where that needs to go. It's automatically gone into my project documents archive. Now, you'll see that I have, just to go up a couple of levels briefly, you'll see I have a file plan, as it's called, with a number of levels and a number of different folders. But actually, this is an enforced file plan. This is designed so that what we can actually do is ensure that documents are only retained within a specific structure. So this projects library, for example, is actually a class, and that class is a compliance extender feature added into SharePoint. And what that means is a class can only contain folders. It can only contain those folders which then can only contain documents. So it means that documents are not interspersed with folders and so forth. We have that rigid structure which is enforced as per good governance practices and guidelines. So that class feature is another compliance extender capability, so it's important to kind of call that out. And you can see now that my documents have been recorded in this particular location alongside some other relevant documents that I need to apply as part of this particular location. Now, one of the other things associated with my project is I have several boxes of physical documents which are also associated with the same project, and I need to be able to apply those and record those and manage those effectively in the same way. So with Compliance Extender, I have another capability to reference external items. So I can actually add in a box of files, and I can add in some metadata and several characteristics about the files relevant to my particular location. So its size, its description, its location, its ID, and whatever else I need to apply. So you can see what it basically means that I can reference and manage external content, external physical documents or artifacts alongside my digital records management platform. And platforms, standards like MoReq actually require you to be able to do these kinds of things. But it really does mean that I can manage everything in one place, which is again really powerful. And of course, if I have an external item which is linked to an external digital system, again, I could reference a URL, for example, rather than a physical object. That, again, is absolutely possible. What I have noticed, though, is someone's uploaded some of these documents which actually don't apply to this. They've actually been misfiled, which is, again, a real challenge in SharePoint because traditionally, when it comes to records management, when a document has been declared as a record, it can never be changed, and it can never be edited. So moving that content is always a challenge, and it's actually not impossible without undeclaring it as a record, and that can actually be an issue when it comes to maintaining the integrity of that record. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually use the same features I showed you previously, and I'm going to cut that content, and I'm going to paste it into my other location. So again, using the same features as before, I can easily file those documents in a new location. Really, really simple. So what we've shown you there is record declaration, management capabilities, and so forth. Now, the final area I want to just briefly touch upon before we summarize is I need to be able to take this content out of SharePoint. So I have a freedom of information request associated with this project. I need to be able to externalize this content. Again, in SharePoint natively, challenging. But with SharePoint out of the box, what I'm going to do is I'm going to export the external items using another compliance extender feature for my FOI request. This enables me to export the content to a designated location out of SharePoint and also apply user permissions around that as well, so only the right people can actually access that content. So with a simple function from an AI compliance extender, I've been able to take that content out and export it to a location over here. Now this export not only has exported the documents and the content, as you can see here, it's actually taken a manifest file, so I can also preserve metadata, permissions, and security and all those other things. This is a MoReq compatible manifest XML file, so we can ensure that not only can we export content out, we could potentially import content in from another system should it have that same XML schema using the MoReq schema, so really powerful. Finally, I need to think about the disposition of those records, and in SharePoint, if I need to, for example, approve the deletion of records once it's ended its life cycle, again, that typically has to be done one by one. With Compliance Extender, I can filter on those dispositions. So I've just clicked the Dispositions button here, and that's automatically providing me with a filtered list of any files which are eligible for disposal. Now, in SharePoint, you would typically have to approve or reject those dispositions on a single basis, and if you've got hundreds or thousands, that can take forever. With Compliance Extender, I can approve in bulk using this feature which is built into the ribbon and enables me to delete those items with a couple of clicks of a button. Really, really simple, and it takes away some of the pain that unfortunately SharePoint has out of the box when it comes to compliance. So we're nearly there now with the demo, so we're pretty much wrapped up. You'll see that the items have been disposed of, and now I can go into my projects library. I can see those items are no longer there, although with Compliance Extender, what we do is we can retain a stub for those deleted items. We can ensure that we can, whilst the items have been deleted and removed for disposition reasons and to free up space ultimately, we can ensure that we can still maintain a record of where the item once was, what it was, and its associated metadata with a management stub, which is another AI Compliance Extender feature. So what we've seen is kind of from cradle to grave, content being created, edited, reorganized, managed, recorded as records for auditability and compliance, and ultimately disposed of using AI Compliance Extender advanced capabilities such as extended metadata management, preventive or supplemental markings, import-export, auditing, and ensuring compliance with standards like MoReq 2010 and so forth. All of these things not only means that we can meet those compliance obligations, but we can also ensure that users find it much easier and much less restrictive to work in a compliant fashion. With that, I'd like to thank you very much for your time today, and I do apologize, I've run 4 minutes over my promise for the demonstration, but I hope you could bear with me for those last few minutes. What I'd like to do now is take any questions that you may have. So should you have any questions, or I think it looks like there are some questions that have come in already, I'll be very happy to answer those for you. So please do use the Q&A pane to answer any questions that you may have. And one of the first questions I've had is, how is this deployed? How do we actually get this into SharePoint in the first place? Well, and also they've asked, how does this apply to Office 365? Fantastic question. So with SharePoint on-premise, of course we can, the Compliance Extender solution is deployed as a SharePoint solution itself, as a set of features. So it's very easy and very straightforward to get into the environment and switch on the capabilities that are required. So whether it's cut and paste, metadata inheritance, or so forth, all of those things can be switched on and off very simply with the set of SharePoint features which are deployed in your farm. So that process is relatively straightforward. What we're actually looking to do for Office 365 is we've actually got a beta program at the moment that we're working on, and we've got some early adopters trialing these capabilities within Office 365 itself using the app model. We're actually going to be announcing the Office 365 flavor of Compliance Extender within the next couple of months. So what I'd ask you to do is stay tuned, but we will be bringing that capability out, and we are trialing it at present, as I say. And we do, though, support a hybrid model should you wish to have an on-premise and cloud-based model. And of course, if you're looking at solutions or hosted models like the government G-Cloud, again, these are things we absolutely support and are available in. So thank you for that question. Another question I've just come in is how much config, just come in, hot off the press, how much config is required in SharePoint itself to deliver AI? So again, a really good question. So frankly, it's very little. So first of all, like I say, deploy the solution in SharePoint, switch on the features, just the buttons in the SharePoint site features list to switch on the capabilities, and you can switch on inheritance, cut and paste, and so forth. So the majority of those capabilities are effectively on, and you can just utilize them. And everything, by the way, is controlled through permissions as well. So if you decide to, you only want certain people to access certain documents or certain features, then we can use permission levels to enable access to specific features. The other elements of configuration normally lie around things like the metadata components, the metadata inheritance, and of course, that's always going to be individual to every single user. So from an AI perspective, we'll always work with you to ensure you can deliver the best model. But the great thing is, with because of the way Compliance Extender is integrated in SharePoint, it's using the existing SharePoint mechanisms, things like the Manage Metadata service to deliver metadata. It's using the same dialogues and the same forms that already exist in SharePoint. We're not using any separate consoles or separate interfaces. So that actual level of configuration is generally quite minimal. It's just a case of establishing what kind of architecture you want to make sure that it meets with your own requirements. So, yeah, thank you for that question. So the next question is, so how can disposition be handled in place? Is the bulk approval available outside of the record center? So typically, whilst the disposition process can actually be handled throughout, the actual ability to do bulk approvals and so forth, that's actually handled typically inside the record center itself. What I would suggest, though, for that particular question is that if you have needs outside of the record center, we can look at how we might integrate into other parts of SharePoint. So I'd encourage you to get in touch, and we can look at your own individual requirements there, because typically the kind of the records management process is actually handled through the records center itself. So if this is the opportunity to ask any other questions, I do have one final question which has just come in, is how is it licensed? Always going to be a question that pops up. With Compliance Extender, we actually license on a per user basis, depending on whether you want a monthly or annual contract, perpetual or non-perpetual. We have a lot of options in terms of how you can actually handle, how we can actually license the product itself. When it comes down to actual pricing, what again I'd encourage you to do is please do get in touch with us. I'll provide, in fact what I'll do, I'll just provide some additional contact details available on the slide now. Please get in touch. All of our contact details are on the website. We have Twitter feeds and all the rest of it. Please do get in touch, and we can help you with any pricing or licensing questions that you may have. So another question that has just come in is, what do we need to deploy, or what additional architecture do we need outside of SharePoint to enable some of these features? That's the fantastic thing. None. We need obviously SharePoint in place, and we need a SharePoint farm deployed, and of course how that's deployed is dependent on your own individual requirements, how you need to scale and so forth. But like I say, our product, or Compliance Extender particularly, is a SharePoint solution. So it deploys within SharePoint itself. There is no additional hardware requirements or additional services, or servers I should say, required to deploy these features. That's what makes it simple, and that's what makes it really easy to deploy over and above maybe some of the other capabilities that exist in the market. But the only other thing you may need to deploy is, I did mention at the very beginning, or did demonstrate at the very beginning, the email integration capability, and that is a separate product which is effectively deployed as an add-on to Outlook. So really simple to deploy as well. But for our email integration capabilities, our SyncPoint product is what would be required there. So not too much additional, but that's something to bear in mind. So it looks like there aren't any additional questions or any additional anything else that's come in. So Finally, I'd like to thank you once again for your time today. Really appreciate all the questions that have come in. I appreciate your attention today. I do hope it was useful. The webinar will be available to a recording, which we'll be sending out, should you wish to want to send this to any of your colleagues or anyone else that might be interested. Thanks once again, and I hope you have a pleasant rest of your day. Thank you.